Welcome back to Grid Down Prepping at Guns America, formerly known as Prepping 101. Today we're doing a specifically Prepping 101 approach to canning meat, because a lot of people, especially this is more for the Hunt 365 crowd than the prepping crowd, because I've done a lot of stuff on canning meat over the years, and as many of you know, I'm very into the metal cans. I prefer the metal cans and metal can sealers, but I've had a hard time sourcing a can sealer for you guys. So I'm going to just do an overview of the glass jars that you see in front of you, because this is right now what you can get the easiest and be able to start canning right now. The reason we can food, and I'm going to pretty much focus on these glass jars, as I said, the reason we can food is to prevent botulism, all right? And botulism is an awful word, right? But the reality is that botulism bacteria is around us all the time. It's part of our life. It's in our gut, but it produces botulism toxin. And in large quantities, botulism toxin will kill you. So botulism toxin in a can that gets left to sit, and then someone takes it out of the can and eats it, or the jar, the bottle, or whatever, and eats it, is not going to be doing well. So what we do is we pressure can these under in a special pot, which I will show you. Not expensive. There are very inexpensive options out there, and these jars are also very expensive. So if you are planning to live off of game, whatever kind of game, whether it's fish, turkeys, anything that is more than one meal, all right? A fish, maybe one meal, right? But not if you're gonna risk going out into the public and going fishing, or sneak out to a stream and try to catch fish for a day and then come back. It probably is more than one meal. So if it's more than one meal or more than one day, you do have to worry about spoilage. And with canning, you don't have to worry about spoilage, because canned food will keep almost indefinitely. There is an official amount of time that they will say on these ball jars of how long canned food is supposed to last, but I have ball jars that have been around for many, many, many years, and I've said many times on these videos that several years ago there was some canned food from the Civil War that was hand canned using soldered steel cans, and it was still viable from the Civil War. These jars were patented by a guy named Mason in 1858. So the technology has been around for a long, long time, and it really hasn't changed that much. As you can see, I prefer these small jars as opposed. These are like this is the half pint. This is the pint jar. I'm sorry, as opposed to the quart jar. The quart jar is probably the more common out there. I figured I would just include them to show you that they don't differ. And for vegetables and stuff like blueberries, stuff like that, quart jars are great. But for meat, you're talking about a fairly large expense. You see, I am canning a great deal of meat. I'm canning about 50 pounds of meat today. Why? Not because I shot a deer, but because I keep kosher, and I want kosher meat for my family after the kosher meat at the store dries up. But if you're a hunter, or if you feel like you could live off of a local population of hogs, like in Florida and the South and Texas, then being able to not live like a cheetah and have to just eat what you can that day and the rest spoils is probably a great idea. And having many hundreds of these on hand, which they are still available right now, at Walmart.com is where I got these personally. They don't sell them at all the Walmarts anymore, but I did get these at Walmart.com, several cases, and they come within a couple days. So having these jars on hand and knowing how to use them, knowing how to can them, understanding the difference of pressure canning. You can can certain things without pressure, just in a pot, like tomato sauce, like fruit preserves, things that are very high acid content. You can can without pressure, because botulism toxin does not live in an acid environment. But things that are not high acid, like vegetables and meat and fish, you have to pressure can. And I will show you the steps to that next. One of the questions I get all the time with canning is, if you're going to can in glass, should you cook raw or cooked? And the answer is that you can do it either way. There are plenty of raw pack directions on there, and I'm going to hold out a couple of these just so that we can do some raw pack at the same time as the hot pack. But there's also another issue that I should mention. You'll see, I'm going to just close these up and let them cook now. That when you cook, whether you cook them in advance like you see me doing, or you raw pack them like this. These hold about 1 pound, by the way. The large ones hold about, the quarts hold about 2 pounds. When you cook them, you're gonna see that the tops of the jars have a lot of water in them. They have fat and water. Now, I want to retain the fat because I'm putting away a lot of flour to make bread, and beef fat with flour is, with bread is great stuff. Okay, so I want to retain the fat anyway for the calories, and the water I don't need. So if you wanted to stir fry the meat or bake your chunks of meat beforehand and then stuff as much as you can into a jar, great, it's all the power to you. But if you don't, if it just doesn't really matter. These jars are not that expensive. They're less than $1 a piece. Both sizes are almost the same price. So I prefer the small ones because they're more durable. You can drop them, and they will not smash anywhere near as easily as these guys are. These guys are like a 2-pound cannonball, and they have a big bearing surface that you can hit against, which is much easier to break them. Ball jars are very thick, as are the Care variety. They're very thick glass. They're very tough. And I've dropped these on a tile floor from 2 feet and they don't break. So I generally don't like to can in glass, as I've explained many times on this column. But I do sometimes because I'm explaining it to you guys. And in this case, I thought I had lids for my steel cans, but I was out of lids. I had gotten a case of these guys and I ran out of lids. So I just happened to buy 50 pounds of meat and I needed some cans. So I decided, you know what? I'm gonna do a basic canning thing for you guys while I'm canning all of this food in the jars, okay? So the way these jars work, before we move on, is that they have a 2-part lid, okay? When they come with a 2-part lid on them. The important thing is this part. This is the true lid of the jar, and you'll see it has a little pop in the top here that will compress when the jar is vacuum sealed. So that is going to position itself right here, and then you're going to screw it down, and you only screw them finger tight. You don't screw the heck out of them. You just do it finger tight, because some air does need to escape as the bottle pressurizes. It will release air from inside the bottle as the can pressurizes, and then as it cools, it sucks it all down tight. Okay, that's how this works. The rings can come off afterwards, and you can save them because they tend to rust if you leave them on because some water gets trapped in there. But after they're done, the finished can is really just this and this. That's it. You can go on the shelf just like this. Now these guys officially are not reusable. For short term, maybe you can reuse some, but recently there is a large amount of these replacement lids available, not just at Walmart, but this company Ball, I think, started making them in China, because all of a sudden there came available these giant, like 48 packs of multicolored things, and I'll cover these at some point, but they do work. You can get them, same thing, at walmart.com. They're all done by pretty much the same seller. So that, you know, it doesn't hurt to get extras of these so that you can just throw them away as you use them. Because a lot of times they don't come off easy. You have to kind of jam a knife under there and it'll bend. So even if you could technically reuse it, probably not a good idea to do so. And that's pretty much what canning is. Now, one thing you're not going to see me do, and I've shared this so much before, but you're always going to get, you're going to get the canning nannies out there. And the canning nannies, you know, all the power to them. If they have the time to wash with soap and sterilize every one of these things before they use them, great. You know, all the power to them. I personally am way too busy for that, because transporting them back and forth to the, I know they're going to get broken. Like, I'm just not that guy, all right? I take them out of the package, I put the stuff in them, and I can it, all right? And I almost never get any failures. I have, like I said, ball jars that have been sitting there for a decade at this point. Many, in all sizes, even the big half-gallons I know where there's a whole case of those big half-gallon ball jars with beets that I just happen to get a case of beets, a giant bag of beets. They don't come in a case. And I canned them. You know, I got a jar of half-gallon a package of half-gallon cans and canned them. So, and they're still there. Years and years later, I think I actually did an article for Prepping 101 with them where I canned them on top of like a kerosene heater or something. It was like an oddball heat source that I used just to show you that you could can on top of like a kerosene heater. So that's the overview of the thing. I put a little bit of MSG. I sprinkle a little bit. I put my meat chunks in a bag, and then I throw some MSG in there. I use a special one that I found at the kosher store, but and sometimes Walmart carries this, but you can just use any MSG if you want. Generally, flavorings and stuff like that does not stand up really well to the canning process, so don't even bother. I find that the MSG does it's good and it lasts and it does make things taste better. And my family is not sensitive to MSG, so I'm happy to put in the MSG. And you'll find that even the toughest meat, like moose meat, right? Before I was kosher, I ate a lot of moose meat when my friend got a moose one year. Tough as nails, slow cooker from hell kind of meat, right? So this is the equivalent of a slow cooker, it pressure cooks the meat as if it was cooked, so it comes out as if it was cooked in a slow cooker, which means it really cooks the hell out of it. Like if you're gonna can meat, I can 15 pounds, 90 minutes, I don't mess around. A lot of people say 60, 10 pounds. I can 15 pounds at 90 minutes and I don't care. I put plenty of water in my canning pot so it doesn't run dry, and I just run it for the 90 minutes because I want this stuff to last forever, and I certainly don't want to get sick when I eat it. So put your meat in pretty much with nothing on it. You can put some salt in, something like that. You can find some recipes online that people claim have stood up to the canning process. But that's my take on how you start out and get the jars filled. You can hot pack them, you can cold pack them. That's up to you. I'm going to do both in this run of jars, just so you see that you can do both. All right, so this batch is done, and you saw the headspace that I did on the cans before, right? So when beef cooks in chunks especially, it does tend to kind of grow out of the can. And you know, you can just wait for them to cool down, and then they're a lot easier to squish. But you also can just put the lid on them. You can just put the lid on them and finger tight, and your headspace is usually going to work out just fine. Okay, you're not going crazy with it. So see how it sticks out of the top here. Well, actually, this one's pretty extreme. So I'll show you this one here. Even when they're that far out, like if you have to take a couple pieces off the top, fine. But usually they're gonna squish right down. It's just that this is really super tough meat, all right? So there's an elasticity to tough meat when it cooks, and it comes out more. Like it will, they kind of push each other out of the top. Hamburger, you don't get that really. You know, what you get that a lot with is actually with fish. Fish comes right out of the top, and if you let it cool a little, you get rid of the problem. But this is the large can. Now I should have heated this water in my canner a little bit. I didn't yet, because sometimes you would worry about them cracking, but I generally don't, because ball jars they're almost like Pyrex. Like they're extremely robust jars. See, this jar had a little bit more headspace, so it's got much more room in there. And like I said, if you want to cook it in advance in a stir fry or in an oven and then put them in the cans, you're gonna get more meat per can. You know, there's just no question that you will, because you won't be canning the water. I don't choose to do that. So that's what the finished cans look like. I'm working on this in my workshop, so I'm actually going to run 2 canning pots at one time, and I'll show you what the difference is between them. The one on the left is a Presto canning pot that used to be available at Walmart for $60 to $70. I think the last price I saw was $69. And it just consists of the pot, the lid, and the gasket. It's a rubber gasket design, okay? And then it's got the weight that sits on top, and the weight is adjustable for 5 pounds to 15 pounds, okay? The one that is available at Walmart.com right now has a gauge on it next to the weight. The weight is not adjustable. It is only 15 pounds, and the price is usually about $110 right now for the same Presto canner, but with the valve. This is an all-American canner, and you can find these online. Red Hill General Store used to retail them. I think that's where this one came from. You still find them on eBay. These are a gasketless design. It's a metal-on-metal design, and the instructions will say to maybe put a little bit of lithium grease around the edge. I've never done that, and it's always been fine. And it's just a gigantic, heavy thing that is way more than you need, and they are several hundreds of dollars. And they come in this size, a little smaller than this, a little taller than this, a little thinner than this, and then there are gigantic ones, which I also have, and I've used in prior videos. I have a lot of canning pots. So there's your cheaper version and your more expensive version. I am going to put in the 2 raw ones with these, and they have an R on top, which I've done in other videos. I believe this one will fit me. Yeah, this one will fit the tall and the short in one go. So I think I'll probably put the raw one down there, and then this up there. And note that I have some airspace in these because I left them in the oven too long. I was doing something else and I forgot them here. So they're well cooked, and a lot of the liquid inside actually boiled off, so that there's airspace in there too. And I wanted you to see that because I don't want you to feel like the whole jar has to contain liquid in order for it to can successfully. I have some of these actual jars that have, like, I tried to can some salmon back for an old article, and it's like because of all the water that was in the salmon, I have like this little piece of salmon in the middle of the can with nothing else in there but a little bit of water, and it's been fine all these years. It's still sitting there, just still sitting there. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had many goes around at it, and I've seen just about everything you can see. Now, I usually go with water in these almost up to the lip of the can. Some people say put an inch of water in the bottom, put 3 inches of water. I go right almost to the lip of the can because I don't want my canner to go dry. I've actually on a rocket stove, actually, I have warped the bottom of one of these Presto canners because it went dry on me, and because I left it, I forgot it. So I don't want them. I want to give myself some room to forget, and so that they can go dry. If they go dry, they will not warp the canner. That Presto canner still worked though. It just had a rounded bottom. When you close up the canners and put them on the heat, you're not going to drop your weights. Very important. Do not drop your weights. And for the All-American, I tighten them up 2 at a time. So that's probably why I have never needed the lithium grease on it, because I'm very careful to tighten them together as I go across the sections, you know, across the tops of them, and then light them. But do not put the weight on until we have vented the air out of the canner. So what you're waiting for to drop the weight is for the air to vent out of the top of the canner. When you see it go to a steady stream of steam without breaks in it, that's when it's ready to drop the weight. All right. With the Presto, you're also going to see the lid lock button come up on it, and that's, you know, it's going to be around that same time that it does that. With the All-American, it doesn't have the lid lock, but you'll see it can sometimes be hard to see. Just let it vent a little bit. If you can't tell when the steam is coming out, the hole is a little smaller on the All-American, I think, and it's just harder to see that. But you'll get a feel for it, I think. Obviously, I'm using these. I'm in my shop, so I'm using these very loud propane burners. Hopefully, you'll be able to hear me over the thing. And then, you know, once this starts dingling, and this guy gets up to temperature, gets up to 15 pounds. On this guy, on the All-American, I've got a dial, pressure dial. So when it gets to 15 pounds, then you start counting your time. On the Presto, when you hear the steam start to escape from under this with it on there, that's when you're going to start your time, all right, for how long you're going to can it. And if you keep your heat up, you're going to hear a dinka, 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 dinka on this, but as long as there's steam coming out from under it, you're at 15 pounds. There is no gauge on this one. That's why I wanted to show it to you. This is the cheap version. It has no gauge. Don't even know if it's available right now, but the other Presto does have a 15-pound gauge, and it's just straight 15 pounds. This one you could lower it to 5 pounds if you want. The All-American has holes for which side of the weight you use for how many pounds of pressure you want. For meat, I always do 15, as I said. This is the end of the cooking process. Now, I let these both go 90 minutes at 15 pounds. So the important thing to do is you do not remove this guy, okay, or this guy, until with the Presto, you have to see the lid drop, the lid lock drop, and with the All-American, you have to see the pressure go to 0. If you don't do that and you forget, sometimes usually you will lose some cans because it'll blow the band, or what happens is the inside pressure of the bottle is greater than the outside pressure, so it will blow the top right off it and usually bend it, and sometimes they even break the jars. So you don't want to do that. Just wait for it to cool down. On the Presto, just wait for the lid. With bottles, with these ball jars, I do not let them go all the way cold before I kind of reach in and tighten every ring up. Then I let them go cold before I remove the rings. With the steel cans, I let everything just go cold. So when the pot is done, you are not going to see that this popper top here is down. Usually they're going to be up. You might see a few. I've got a few in there that are down. this just went to 0, and I just opened it. You can see it's still boiling inside the jar. The raw ones also are boiling inside the jar. So now what you're supposed to do is tighten your bands. Okay, one by one, you just go through and tighten your bands, preferably without burning yourself on the pot. And they do loosen up during this process, so it's not for nothing. Like, if you want to really make sure that you're tight, you should take them out and tighten them up. I don't know if it's because the metal, because the steel or whatever it is, I assume it's steel, it could be zinc, but nah, it's probably not zinc. Zinc is poisonous. So you just want to tighten them up, and then that will allow them to cool and have some pressure on the, it'll have some pressure on the rim as it cools. It's going to pull the vacuum, and that will give it the pressure to can forever. So here we are the next day, and the canners are cold. I left them overnight. This is the giant All-American, and this is the smaller All-American. Plus, I used the Presto. Like I said, I did about 50 pounds of meat, so it was a lot of jars. I'm on my last bottle here, and I was thinking that I should show you the why I don't agree with Karens. I just don't believe that the precautions that they take matter. And as you can see, this is why. Because the pot usually ends up with, at the very least, dirty water, and usually some fat, like you see here. It's usually kind of a gross mess. And that means that underneath this lid, that stuff escaped. You know, and there's just no way, I don't think there's any way you can argue that, is that the material, the meat and the particles and the fat, it all kind of went through there at some point. So making sure that lid, that edge is pristine, I just don't believe is a thing. I think it's just a bunch of Karens who have nothing better to do with their lives than give people reasons not to do things and prohibit them from experimenting themselves. Sorry, but that's just the way I feel. And the reason I do the reason I took on Prepping 101 to begin with is to give people the courage to say, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. And that is the way it is with canning. You don't even, if you're gonna plan for the apocalypse here, you don't even need to do it. It's still fun to do it, it's fun to learn how to do it, it's fun to test yourself. But just watching this video and understanding it and having the tools that you need to do it is all you're ever gonna need. It's like people who don't buy a gun because they can't get a gun safe today. It's the stupidest thing, that just because I don't have time to experiment with canning, I'm not gonna do canning. You know how to do canning now. Like, there's no mystery to this. There's no rocket science here. This is done very easily. It's not a complicated system. You just have to make sure that you're using a pressure canner, because the open air canners just can't kill the botulism bacteria, botulinum it's called. And as long as you're canned, you know, and like I said, you know, you don't want to see the raw. The raw ones they're much more solid. You see how the water kind of sealed at the top, you know, but there's no difference in the can itself. The can is exactly the same thing. That's the small raw one that I did. And I have the large raw one that I did that has actually some space at the top. You see, so it's not going to be a consistent thing anyway, that everything's going to look exactly the same. But you know what I said? I was talking before about the years that I've kept these cans, right? But the years don't really count. I'll tell you what counts is that I have never had a failure. Once a can is in this state, that it's successfully canned, it's shaken up, I get the fat in there, that once it's in this shape, okay, it is literally forever. And I'm not going to take on the liability of telling you to eat old canned food. Do what you want. This is not advice. It's my experience. But as you can see, this is canned. This is canned meat. It may not taste the greatest. It may taste dry. It may be not great. It may taste like we call it cholent. It may seem like it's set in a slow cooker for 20 hours, because sometimes canned meat, does come out like that. But it's meat. And if in the coming days, the only way for you to eat meat is to either have it on hand or kill it yourself, and you don't want to have to live like a cheetah, then it's a good idea to have some canning stuff on hand. We'll see you next time.
Without the Second Amendment, the rest of the Constitution is just a piece of paper. The tyrannical government has guns, and as their corrupt, bought and paid for narrative falls apart, they'll be more tempted to turn them on us. But don't worry, you're not alone, patriots. Buy a gun today from GunsAmerica.com, America's oldest and most trusted online platform for buying and selling the guns that keep your loved ones safe. Join the millions of gun buyers who shop there monthly. Private sellers and gun dealers. List your sales for free. No fees for transactions within 50 miles. Selling fees half the cost of auction sites. When you sign up for free at GunsAmerica.com, you get exclusive access to Guns America Digest, delivered every Monday, honest gun reviews, firearm instruction, and wisdom from America's most popular gun writers. You also get Guns America This Week. Don't miss any important Second Amendment stories, and several monthly magazines on hunting, prepping, and long-range shooting. When you sign up today at GunsAmerica.com, you get $10 off your first online gun purchase. Join the fight today at GunsAmerica.com.